Let's talk about HTTP methods in this video. HTTP methods are also known as HTTP verbs. These HTTP methods represents the type of operation the client wants to perform on a resource using the HTTP request. We have 9 different HTTP methods and 5 of them are commonly used and the other 4 are rarely used. The commonly used HTTP methods include get, post, put, patch and delete. The less commonly used HTTP methods include head, options, trace and connect. Let's see what each of these mean in a little bit more detail. Get method is used to read the resource. You have a resource and you want to read that particular resource, then you'll be using get method. If you want to add a resource, then you'll be using post method. If you want to update or replace a resource, then you'll be using put. Patch is very similar to put, but rather than replacing the entire resource, you'll be making partial updates to the resource. Delete is used to delete a resource. And on the less commonly used methods, first we have head. Head is very similar to get, but it doesn't have any body. When you make a head request, you'll be getting the response, but the response will not have any body. It will only include the header. One of the use case for head is, let's say for example, you want to check whether the file exists first before downloading it. So you can use head method to check whether a file exists, and if it does exist, then you can make another get request to download that file. Then we have options. Options is used to find out what other methods are supported by this particular resource. Let's say you have a resource called student and you want to find out what operations are supported by that particular student resource, whether it is get, put, patch, delete. Then you'll be making options requests to that particular resource, and in response you'll be getting all the HTTP methods supported by that particular resource. Then we have trace. Trace is one of the rarely used HTTP method, and normally you'll use trace for diagnostics. When you use trace method to send a request to your server will echo that request back to you. So this way you'll be able to see what request has reached your server, and you'll be able to figure out if anything is wrong with that. So that is what trace does. Then finally we have connect. Connect is again one of the rarely used method. This is normally used for tunneling and proxying, and this is normally used for proxying HTTPS connections. Okay. Now you might wonder, why do you need to use these methods? Generally speaking, you can use wrong methods and you can still get it working. For example, you can use put or post to read a resource, and you can also use get method to update a resource on the server. So when that is the case, why do you need to use these methods correctly? The reason why you need to use these methods correctly is for clean design and clarity. So when someone looks at your documentation or API, they should be able to clearly identify what this particular resource supports just by looking at these methods. Just by looking at these methods, they'll be able to infer that, okay, so this particular resource supports reading, writing, updating, deleting. But if we don't use these methods correctly, then that kind of inference and clarity will not be there. So that is one of the main reasons why we need to use these methods correctly. Okay. So now, how do you know you are using these methods correctly? So this is one of the commonly asked questions, right? So what method to use for what operation? In my mind, I classify all operations into 2 separate categories. One is CRUD, which is create, read and update, delete. And the second one is actions. Okay. So any operation that you are performing to create a resource or reading a resource or updating a resource or deleting a resource will fall under this CRUD category. And if your operation is falling under this CRUD category, then this is the methods that I'll use. For creating a resource, I'll be using post, and for reading a resource, I'll be using get. And for updating a resource, we can either use put or patch depending on how we are doing the update. If you are replacing the whole resource, then I'll be using put. If you are actually, updating only partial set of data within that resource, then we'll be using patch. And for deleting a resource, we'll be using delete method. One of the things that I wanted to clarify between create and update is that for creating, we are using post because post is not idempotent. So this post method by definition is not idempotent. What it means, what idempotency means. So if an operation is idempotent, then we will be able to repeat that operation any number of times without causing any additional side effects. So for example, when you are updating a resource with some data, you'll be able to perform that same update operation again and again. But after the first time, you'll not have any effect on the resource because the resource already has the update. So the second and third time that you are doing that operation will not have any effect. So that type of operation is idempotent operation. You'll be able to repeat the operation any number of times without causing any side effect. All methods except post is idempotent. So post is basically non-idempotent. What it means is that each time you make a post request, the resource will have side effect. So this is very apt for creating a resource. When you want to create a resource, each time you create a resource, you want a new resource to be created, right? So because of that, for create, it is better to use post. Okay. Just to repeat, we are using post for create because post is the only method which is not idempotent, and that is exactly what we need for creating a resource. Okay. So this is on the CRUD side. Any operation that doesn't fall under this CRUD category will be classified as actions. Okay. So this includes things like logging in, logging out, things like sending email. So anything that doesn't fit the CRUD category will be called as actions. And for any actions, I'll be using post method. So post is the HTTP method that I'll be using any non-CRUD actions. Okay. So again, because post is not idempotent, this suits these actions because most of the time these actions will be non-idempotent. When you are sending an email, each time you make that request, a new email will be sent. And similarly, for example, when you're logging in, each time you log in, you'll be issued a new session token. So these will have side effects each time you make that request. So post is very apt for that as well. Okay. So that is all I wanted to cover in this video. I hope this is useful. Thank you.